Hello, my name is Berkeley Warner. I am here today with Omar of Matcha Capital. Matcha Capital is a fund which invests in uh, developing world, mostly startups in crypto. And previously, Omar was the director of MENA at Binance, which is Middle East and North Africa, for those not familiar with that acronym. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Omar. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. It's pleasure to talk to you, and been a very interesting time in the crypto market. So lots to talk about, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I guess because you mentioned that, we are. For those that might be listening later on, it's July 2022. So things may be very different in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months from now. But we're currently in a bit of a bear market, or as I might say, a build market. And do you have any thoughts as someone that's currently investing in the space and running a fund on how you're approaching the bear market, how you think other players maybe should see this, etc.
Yeah, no, I think you made a good point there. I mean, the market's been absolutely brutal. There's no hiding from it. Even as a big crypto believer, a big crypto fan, it's been a very bloody few weeks and months. But not that unexpected. The market tends to be cyclical, just like the economy. Although the cycles are a lot shorter, they tend to be sort of 3, 4 year cycles. So we've had quite a big correction. So down from all time highs in most big crypto tokens, down 75, 80% to their low, which has caused a lot of panic in the markets. But this is probably the third cycle we're seeing here, and each cycle the market's getting a little bit more mature. One of the big benefits of these down markets, of course, everyone's sort of focused on price, but during these bear markets, the market is really focused on building, or should be focused on building value for the next bull run. Whether that's 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever that may be. So having, as an investor, having people less focused on price and more focused on product is exactly what we look for. On the price side, of course, there are advantages being a fund that's deploying capital, in terms of the fund is designed to make absolute returns. So there are a number of bargains in the market at the moment. As we say, everything's on sale. So I would say, good time to invest with caution, but also a really good time to build. So I think people building in this space should be prepared to be potentially building for around 12 months time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you said there. This isn't the first cycle that these markets have been through. Depending on when we start, there have been several, three, maybe more times where the major crypto assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum have dropped in value by 80%, and they've recovered. So on one hand, obviously I'm not a financial advisor, but past performance is not necessarily a an indicator of future performance. But this isn't a brand new situation. I know you've been in crypto a while, right? So you've developed. You haven't just read about the three cycles. You've lived through them.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Each cycle tends to have something slightly different about it, and the big thing for me in this cycle is we've had some, seriously big events and big liquidations from some huge crypto players, and in the last cycle we saw, we had a bear market from sort of 2018 and 20, 18, 19, 20. And the big thing there was you started to get a lot of people just give up on crypto, not just in the retail market, but in the institutional side as well. Banks were closing crypto desks, etc. This cycle feels different because you haven't got a lot of big institutions say, okay, well, we're not going to touch crypto for a while. Quite the opposite, really. You're seeing more institutions come into the market. So that's the big thing that gives me a little bit more hope that this cycle will be, perhaps shorter and less severe in a infrastructure sense than the last cycle.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, including things for the podcast. I mean, recently I interviewed someone who's in charge of Colombia's biggest bank, their crypto strategy division. And yeah, there didn't seem to be any sort of feelings or questions about, will crypto be important 5 years from now, et cetera. It just seemed to be kind of more about navigating, the current bear market and not sort of long-term feasibility questions, which I think is what you're pointing to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. All right, and yeah, I'm curious. So I mentioned briefly what you had done before that you worked at Binance. I know there's also other things that you did, and want to make the introduction too long. Could
Mm.
you tell us a little bit more about the interesting background you have and the things you've done?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm a trader by background. So I started off trading equities and oil in London,
Okay.
um, nearly 20 years ago now, and ran my own companies all within the sort of trading sector, commodities and energy specifically as well. And then 2016, I was trading energy back in probably 2010 when I first heard about Bitcoin, and completely ignored it. Like most people, just completely ignored what Bitcoin was. Didn't go down the rabbit hole at that point and start investigating it, and sort of brushed it off. And that would happen a few times over the coming few years. It's funny. I always hear people saying, "I wish I would have discovered Bitcoin in 2010 or 2012." In reality, most people would have sold, either lost access to that Bitcoin or sold very early. So I always say to people that you shouldn't worry; you're still early now. Opportunities are
Sure.
still. So the first time I would say I took the whole technology piece seriously was 2016. Um, Again, I was running my own company there, trading energy, and I remember someone came into my office and sat down in my boardroom, and he spent about 2 hours with me just telling me about this whole new concept called blockchain is going to transform the world, not just in commodity markets, but generally financial markets and the future of money. And I just sat there and listened to him. And that was, for me, that was the moment. In my experience, most people can kind of remember that moment where they were sort of sold, at least on doing more research. And that was it for me, really, in 2016. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, this is sort of a recurring theme. I really buy into this decentralized sort of vision. And yeah, at that point, I within a couple of weeks, I said to the rest of my board, I said, look, we should pivot the company and focus on blockchain. Of course, they said, you're crazy. We've never heard of blockchain, and we're not doing that. So
They asked if that was a new kind of oil or equity or something like that.
exactly. I mean, 2016, you can imagine. So yeah, I just said, look, I'm doing this anyway. Made a difficult decision to sort of sell my company to the other partners, and went all in on crypto. So sort of back in 2016, ran a couple of my own crypto companies in the space until 2020, and actually 2017 was a bit of a turning point for me because I met CZ, who of course is the CEO of Binance, the biggest crypto company, full stop. Very interesting character, and again, real sort of passion for crypto. So that gave me some degree of comfort that, okay, there are other crazy people around in this space that are leaving careers in the traditional financial
Sure.
sector and pursuing uh, this whole blockchain decentralized future concept. So sort of came back full circle, really, when I'd sold my company in 2020. Came back to CZ and said, hey, look, I still want to stay in crypto. What should I do next? And he said, come and run MENA for us at Binance. So
Okay.
MENA was an area, Middle East and North Africa is an area that I've done business in before. I had a good network there. And it sort of felt like a startup within a startup. So, yeah, I eventually sort of ran that for Binance for 18 months, took the company into Dubai. And then November 21, I decided, I'd sort of taken them to a good place in the region. Crypto companies were starting to come to Dubai, and it felt like a natural point for me to then go and do my own thing again, which I then did, and then founded Matcha Capital, which has allowed me to be a little bit more across the industry. So Matcha is essentially it's actually a rather than a VC, it's a hedge fund. So we take positions on existing tokens, but there's a small VC element where we invest in up and coming pre-seed sort of crypto companies, particularly as you say in the developing world.
Oh, okay. All right. That's interesting. I don't think I was completely clear on that before. But yeah, so it's a hedge fund with a VC arm.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, I was curious. I mean, I guess this applies. So, okay. So with the tokens, are these? I mean, these would obviously be tokens that are these like utility tokens? Are these tokens that are to raise funds for startups? What are the tokens that your hedge fund focuses on?
yeah. Most of the tokens are sort of larger cap coins that you'd expect. So we use our sort of our background and expertise in trading to take positions on those larger coins. And then around a quarter of the fund is allocated to investing in new coins, new tokens that don't exist yet. So we help teams and companies actually launch their token and invest at the earliest stage. So pretty much the first check in to these sort of fledgling crypto companies.
Okay, perfect. And what are for you and your fund? What are some of the areas that you're most interested in involving crypto and blockchain with? What are some of the big picture use cases you see, whether that be a sector or an idea?
Yeah, no, really interesting actually, and sort of we have the benefit of speaking to a lot of players and understanding what they're investing in, and I'm a big believer in number one, trying to focus on things that will fundamentally define new categories, but also sticking to sort of what you're best at, where your network is, etc. So naturally, with the trading background, I'm always focused on, exchanges, whether they're centralized or decentralized. So that's an area that we will always invest in. And that becomes interesting when I'm looking at geographies, particularly where in jurisdictions that don't have a national champion or a very strong, exchange. Really interested in that sector. Aside from that, I think we've seen everything sort of comes in waves. So we had the DeFi wave, we had of course the NFT wave most recently. Um, for me, I think the next wave is going to be what I call DeFi 2.0.
Okay.
So in this whole story that's unfolded over the last few months with the collapse of the crypto markets, DeFi has actually come out of it pretty well. Where you have centralized structures, where you have an individual or a small team making decisions, those are the companies that have really got into a lot of trouble in this bear market. They've often caused or exacerbated the collapse in the markets. The DeFi protocols actually have held up really well because essentially, the adage code is law, right? So you can't
Sure.
intervene, and these things are sort of self-regulated, which is what's personally very interesting to me. And I know you take an interest in the decentralization piece yourself, and so I'm a big believer in that second wave of DeFi that we'll see, which are solving sort of real world problems, financing, replacing traditional financial sector models with DeFi. So I'm very focused on DeFi 2.0. And aside from that, an area that I'm very surprised that we haven't seen much innovation in yet is decentralized social media. Um, I think people forget that behind the technology, there are human beings, and looking at human behavior and sort of studying human behavior, which in technology often manifests itself as social media networks or whatever. That's going to be a huge area to see how Web3 takes on, a decentralized social media piece. So I'm very interested in connecting with projects that are really plugged into, humans in different niches and human behavior. And, the obvious user case being, of course, metaverse, which we hear so much about now.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. One thing you mentioned that I really related with was this idea of that a lot of the companies that are having problems in DeFi recently are essentially companies that weren't really DeFi. They were sort of saying they were saying they were DeFi more than they were DeFi. And I think as I don't know, I'm guessing, but I think both of us probably have a lot of critiques of the traditional finance system. So I think in a way I might see, okay, well, the companies that were most similar to the traditional finance system in DeFi were the ones that had the most problems. And
Mm.
the ones that have been most resilient essentially are the ones that are, I would say, more forward looking, integrating in these new, not just technologies, but ideas. And I think definitely what you said about the idea of technology being a very important component, but something that it's a tool to interact with human psychology and societies, and not something that stands completely on its own.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I think currently you've been in Dubai a decent amount. Does either you or your fund have a specific geographic location? And then I guess I'd also be curious. I actually haven't been to Dubai myself. What is the crypto scene in Dubai like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, although we operate out of Europe, I spend a lot of my time in Dubai, and have done for the last particularly the last 2 years. And the scene's really, really grown. Number one, we'd love to welcome you here to Dubai as soon as possible
Oh,
and show you
thank
around. I
you.
mean, but I mean, the scene here has really grown over I would say, the last more or less 12 months. So if I put my Binance hat back on temporarily, we sort of brought
Okay.
Binance into Dubai around October last year. So we're sort of approaching that first year. And I remember having a conversation, and Dubai is very relevant at the moment for a couple of reasons. Number one, Dubai and the UAE as a whole sort of held up very well during COVID. It seemed to have managed things very well. And when other places were shut down, Dubai was one of the few places that was open for business. So I think the whole of the
Interesting.
Emirates here sort of covered themselves with quite a lot of glory during a very difficult period, which attracted people anyway. And then sort of the crypto scene, um, for me, Dubai is a perfect breeding ground for crypto, as a hub of innovation. I'm sure you'll be aware of Dubai's reputation of, innovation, trying to be the world first in many areas. And so from a crypto point of view, it makes sense that, the UAE and Dubai in particular would be so welcoming to crypto. And that's sort of what we saw, really. When we started discussing with various either governmental organizations or other players here, there was a really healthy balance of, we don't want to overregulate. We do want,
Hmm.
obviously, to foster innovation, but it has to be done within a framework, within, obviously, something sustainable. So there was a very, I would say, common sense approach. And when we made the decision to take Binance into Dubai, we sort of sent out a message, really saying, look, what you'll find is that Binance, being the dominant player in crypto generally, you'll find the industry will follow. And since then we've had, any number of firms. There's, at last count, there's over 1,000, maybe approaching 1,500 crypto companies now set up in Dubai,
Okay.
which is incredible, really. Within the
Yeah.
last, there's probably been more than 1,000 within the last 6 months. So it is been.
Would it be fair to say that Dubai is the major hub for crypto in the Middle East, or are there sort
Absolutely.
of competing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Certainly within the Middle East, and increasingly on a global stage as well now. So I think,
Okay.
Dubai is probably in that top three conversation that you have when you talk about global crypto hubs now. So there's still some work to do for sure, but I think one thing for me that's always been attractive about Dubai is that it has a very can-do attitude. It's very easy to do
Okay.
business.
Okay. That's interesting. No, it's definitely on my list of places to check out. I don't know if what I'm about to say is accurate, but I think in my mind it has at least characteristics of a startup city concept, for what I've seen and heard. And also I'm interested in sort of some of the free trade zone stuff that I've read and heard about there. Are there, for founders that might be out there, if someone incorporates a crypto startup in Dubai, are there any sort of benefits that they might receive, whether that be, clearer regulations or tax breaks or some other sort of benefit?
Yeah, I mean the tax benefits here particularly are particularly attractive, both on an individual level and on a company level. What you'll find is a lot of people working in crypto or who have worked in crypto also tend to gravitate to a sort of a, let's call it a small government worldview where you
Sure.
have lower taxation, etc., more freedom of the individual. So from that perspective, there's alignment, and yeah, I would say the ecosystem is growing here. I think there are sort of those emerging hubs of support by both government and non-governmental sort of organizations here that are naturally forming, because obviously we've welcomed, I would say hundreds, probably into the thousands now of crypto folk that have relocated here. So you're starting to get more and more infrastructure. In terms of you as a crypto startup in Dubai, you have access to good talent here, and it's very easy to do business. So I would say, as well as places like Switzerland, increasingly
Sure.
Dubai is a really good place to be for a startup at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. It does. I think as more people are working online, and I think not only the capability to work online, but I think maybe COVID sort of was a turning point in terms of people saying, yeah, we don't need to be in person to work together all the time, or even if I do have a team, we can consider going somewhere else. That yeah, a lot of people probably are looking at different places of the world, and it's interesting. You mentioned Switzerland. I feel like one of the things that is starting to happen is that people sort of look for like which cities or countries are functioning well
Yeah.
in terms of wanting to start a company, and being willing to consider different options. I know I'm from the U.S., and I sometimes think about how, at least in my opinion, I felt like the U.S. used to be a lot more innovative, but
Mm.
recently, particularly with crypto, you know, some of the best investments of the last 10 years, uh, having an American passport was a liability for investing in.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, as someone that admires a lot of things about the country I grew up in, I don't see that as a positive trend
Mm.
myself. And yeah, it sounds like there might be other places in the world, including Dubai, that could be different there.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Um, kind of switching things up a little bit. If nothing comes to mind, that's cool. But on your Twitter profile, you had this phrase that I enjoy that says, "quote believer in financial revolutions or revolution dot 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 and memes."
Yeah.
Are there any sort of favorite memes, whether past or current, that come to mind for you?
Oh, I mean, so many. I mean, I'm a big believer in the meme culture, yeah, and it's especially in crypto, as you know. It's sort of it's very difficult to understand crypto without understanding the memes and references. So, I always laugh when sometimes you're in this crypto bubble where you're sending each other the same memes, and then when you have to interface with either the government, regulators, or traditional finance folk, you have to sort of remind yourself that this is probably not normal in their world.
Sure.
So I'm
Yeah,
yeah,
it's almost like some of the crypto memes have hyperlinks to knowledge
yeah,
or things like that might be more common in the crypto world than outside of the crypto world.
yeah, absolutely. And the thing I like about it is that a lot of the crypto memes are self-deprecating. A lot of it is crypto laughing at themselves. So we know how ridiculous some of these things are. We know it's ridiculous that a token goes up 10,000% and then falls 90%, in the space of a year. We know that. So one thing that I really enjoy about the memes is the kind of that self-deprecating nature of yeah, we realize how volatile this
Hmm.
thing and how new we are. So probably one of my favorite crypto memes is hide the pain, Harold, this elderly gentleman that is kind of smiling through gritted teeth, and it's so relatable. When the market's particularly down 40-50%, and he's kind of smiling through the pain.
Oh, okay.
Um, that's probably one of my most used memes, and at the moment we've been using it a lot, right? With the markets the way they are.
Yeah, 100%. I just Googled. I wasn't actually familiar with the Hide the Pain Herald name, but
Okay.
I have definitely seen it. It's the older guy in front of the laptop holding a coffee cup. Uh, I don't actually see a way here to share my screen, or I would do that to show our viewers. But yeah, if you Google Hide the Pain Herald, or I'll try to put a link, that one pops up.
I mean,
Uh,
I'd love to hire him for a matcha campaign. I mean, I think
okay.
he's become the face of crypto traders pretending that they're not devastated by their portfolio dropping 80%. So yeah, it's as I said, look, the crypto market really knows how to laugh at itself and not take it too seriously.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. Yeah, yeah, there is a lot of like self criticism within different people in crypto and their companies, and I think that is, yeah, that is, yeah. Actually, I hadn't completely thought of it exactly in that way, but you're right. That's true. And if I compare that with, I don't know, some of the things I might see with larger governments, it feels like there's a lot less in some areas of the world of you're certainly not going to see the current president of the U.S. posting a meme criticizing himself or something like that. Whereas you might actually see that in the CEO of a crypto company.
Yeah.
Um, do you just one last thought on memes? Do you think it would be fair uh, to compare memes to like the modern version of a propaganda poster, just in terms of like, I don't know, yes or no, sort of, or whatever you think there?
I mean, I do think that memes are often used to push particular narratives as well. Where crypto is still very tribal, especially in a bull market. So if you see on Twitter, generally people are very will take it to heart if you're criticizing their particular coin or a position that they've taken. So and I'm thinking about whether it be XRP, whether it become this idea of Bitcoin or Ethereum maximalists. You know, uh, the common thread throughout that is the sort of memes mocking a certain point of view. So,
Hmm.
and I hope it's funny. I hope it stays that way for as long as possible. Meaning, I hope that Web3 does not become as corporate as traditional finance is now for as
Sure.
long as possible. And I suppose meme culture in crypto is quite a good barrier to keep it within the crypto community and decentralized. And we should be saying, look, rather than the crypto industry conforming and becoming like a corporate, and in 5 years' time we just look like another bank, it should be no, the other way around, that you need to, coming from the outside industry, you need to understand what these means, what they refer to, how crypto folk communicate with each other, and you've got to educate yourself in these ways. So
Sure.
I always encourage people to try and delve in, go on the forums, go on Twitter, and try and follow the right people. And it's a sort of light-hearted look at the space, but it tells you a lot about where this whole movement of for decentralization is sort of coming from.
Yeah. No, totally. I think a lot of us in the world, even if we're not in crypto, probably feel like there's a lot of information, and maybe we have limited time. So
Mm.
I think in my personal experience, sometimes maybe I see a meme that makes me start researching something that if someone had just sent me a 20-page paper, I probably would have been like, well, I'll read that later or something like that. Uh, so yeah, it can be like an entrance point or a first interaction. Um, yeah, so no, I mean it's really interesting to hear about like your perspectives and everything you have going on. At this point right now, for anyone that might want to be, or anyone that's listening, do you have any sort of calls to action or ways that whoever's listening might be able to support you? Are you looking for founders to send you pitch decks? Are you looking to hire a meme lord or someone else? What's a way that people might be able to interact with you or provide value?
Yeah, absolutely. Always looking to speak to. I always encourage people to get in touch. And one of the things I say, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, we're just in the middle of revamping our new website to make it easier to send us presentations. Um, I always say to people, don't worry about asking for permission. You don't need to sort of message me and ask, can I send your deck? Just send me your deck. I want to see it. I read. I will look at every deck, or someone on the team will look at every single deck. Now, there are certain hacks that I always encourage founders, because everyone's chasing the same dollars, and
Sure,
within this climate, it's very important to stand out. So I try and be as a former founder myself, try and be as founder friendly as possible, and encourage people that probably the funds that you're sending your decks to, and I can only speak for ourselves, but generally they will read your messages, they will read your cold emails, DMs, whatever it may be. So you have a very limited, maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds to capture their attention. So I would
sure,
say you can try and follow a set of rules. Keep it really brief. Who you are, what you're doing, and what the ask is. It's fine. You don't necessarily have to make small talk and feel ashamed about asking for something. If you're asking for money, say you're asking for money. If you're asking for a role, advice, whatever it may be. So I'd say be as direct as possible and as brief as possible. And obviously, with founders that are looking to get funded, please do include your deck as well.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sort of keep it simple, try to make it clear. Who it is, what you're doing, what the ask is. That sounds like solid advice to me. Um, are you currently also looking for investors that might want to invest in your fund or not particularly?
Yeah, it's something that we've thought about sort of extending a little bit. As I referred to earlier on, I'm a big believer in doing what you do best as a person, as an individual. So one of the things we're increasingly exploring is having, maybe regionally focused funds. So looking at other areas. So, being I'd say spending a lot of time in Dubai, we get a lot of exposure to, let's say, Asia and Africa as regions, which is sort of super interesting to me in terms of where markets can sort of, or products can get traction. Um, Particularly relevant for today, but South America is, I'm aware there's so much talent in not just South America but South and Central America that probably doesn't get the exposure that it should do. So, we're always looking for partners within those regions who are specialists, who understand the region very well, and we can perhaps lend our expertise in our network, our know-how, connections to other funds, ability to structure, etc. But we always try and rely on local partners in those regions. So that's something that we'll probably will be exploring over the next few months, is trying to find a regional partner in that part of the world, really, that can bring us and just tell us what kind of cool stuff's happening in crypto within that part of the world.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So you're looking at, I think we mentioned before, more like ascending world or developing world in general, kind of Africa and Asia focused, but also looking to move into Latin America, which I think is maybe one of the reasons where we're doing this podcast. Is I'm currently based in Latin America. I've spent probably most of my adult life switching between Latin America and the U.S.
Mm.
So, anyways, that I think there was like some common interests there. Um, with Since you're currently specializing in Africa and Asia, are there anything particularly interesting going on in those regions, crypto and blockchain wise, that you might like to elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still in a lot of these regions, there's an opportunity for the financial system to almost skip a whole step in the development. So if I look at Europe, for example, we had this transition from bricks and mortar banks, physically going into a bank, carrying out transactions, to the banking system we have now, which is, I would say it's functional but not efficient.
Sure.
And by that I mean, okay, yes, it works. Generally, you use your Visa debit card or credit card, it works, but incredibly slow. Even doing something like an international transfer, you've got, I don't know if you or people listening know how this works, but you tend to have not just a bank to bank transfer, but you have sort of correspondent banks in the middle. So you have a very convoluted process that should take seconds, but actually can sometimes take up to a month in some cases that I've heard recently, just to transfer money.
I,
So,
I had a case with a startup. I was involved in a crypto startup before where we sent a rather large wire from the US to Panama. And
okay.
there was essentially, I think it was like a period of 10 days where neither bank knew where the funds
Hmm.
were or could really tell us anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that's very different in my opinion than if I send you crypto within a couple minutes, I can see online the status of what's happening, how
Yeah.
many confirmations there are. So yeah, just to back you up there for people that are listening that maybe don't have experience sending money between different countries, it's not always easy.
I mean, it's worlds apart, really. Worlds apart, and So going back to your question, I suppose in Asia and Africa, a lot of these countries have got the chance to sort of skip that legacy system and adopt crypto at a much quicker rate. And I'd say, the forward thinking governments in a lot of those countries, because there's innovation going on in all of these markets. Sometimes when you have a problem to solve, that problem gets solved quicker. So, as I say, I've
Sure.
spent most of my time in the UK. Um, Generally, very easy to make bank to bank transfers within the UK. Pretty much instant. So it's not really a problem through an app.
Hmm.
You apply that to some of the countries we look at in Asia and Africa, and it very much is a problem. This people who don't trust the banks because they don't trust their governments.
No.
So they're literally, even if their salaries are getting paid into their banks, they're drawing their cash out from the banks and sticking banknotes, at home under their mattress.
Sure.
So you've got an incredibly inefficient system. So those markets really interest me, where you're kind of skipping a step. We don't have to rely on the legacy banking system, and you can go straight into sort of blockchain based transactions. So any company that are building infrastructure in sort of payments, cross border payments, and also replacing traditional financial products is very interesting to funds like ours, but also a bunch of funds that I speak to on a pretty much a daily basis.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I think in my mind I compare it to a lot of the regions you're talking about. They sort of skipped landlines.
Mm,
They went sort of, if someone's looking for, if what you're saying sounds interesting and someone's looking for a comparison, I think there's a lot of comparisons there where there's a lot of countries in the world where people sort of went from like no phone to a cell phone as opposed to a landline in between. And I think there's not only parallels with that in terms of a lot of things in crypto and blockchain, but there's also it helps to have a smartphone for sure,
yeah,
and there's a lot of people that are now able to do those things across the world, even if those countries haven't built up a banking infrastructure or landlines, etc.
absolutely.
Um, Cool. So you've been in the space a little while, and there's a question I ask some guests, but not all. And you seem like someone that enjoys some of the concepts of crypto and Bitcoin. And essentially, the question is for those that aren't familiar, the first block of the Bitcoin
Hmm.
that it's called the Genesis block. It has a message in it, so maybe a lot of people don't know this unless they're really into crypto, but you can incorporate messages into transactions, and then they're there on the blockchain, and they can't necessarily be taken down, especially if it's something like Bitcoin, or at least it's harder to take down than Twitter taking down a tweet. And the first block of Bitcoin has the message that says "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," which is a reference to the financial crisis in 2008, around the time Bitcoin was started. And anyway, so my question to you would be: is there any sort of message you would like to communicate to people? If you were sort of if you could put a message out there on the blockchain that you would, have it be either hard or impossible to have censored. What would that message be?
Yeah, no, really good question, and what a powerful message for trying to understand why people are so passionate about decentralization. And I'm sure your listeners will be a mix of crypto and non-crypto fans, and the reason I got into this space is exactly because, going back to 2008 and the financial crisis, is, I was from the legacy financial system. I was a trader, traded equities and oil back in 2000, from 2005 until about 2010. And, when the whole financial crisis unfolded, the actions that governments took, I mean, people might not realize it if they haven't studied this area, which is, can be quite niche. But, the financial crisis of 2008 led to extraordinary measures, not just so-called austerity or cuts in government spending, which really crippled people, but also, some countries. If I look at Cyprus literally took money out of private citizens' banks and used it for state purposes. I mean, tell me
Yeah.
how that is reasonable in
What
any.
wasn't it around like 30% of whatever the deposits were? Or it's been a while, but I remember that news when it came out because it was.
Absolutely. I had a friend who had a business there, and she lost a ton of money because the government just decided to say, "Oh, actually, we're broke, so we're going to take some of your money." I mean, and this is not that long ago. So
Sure.
I think for me, this is really what got me into this sector, to say, okay, well, there has to be a better way of managing an economy. And for me, the message that I would really send out would be that I personally believe that we are at, um, let's say, the beginning of the end of this kind of uber capitalist political economic system that we have now. The wheels are starting to fall off already, and the signs are there. We had a let's call it a warning in 2008 and 2008 to 2010, the sort of the financial meltdown of just how unstable the base of this house of cards of the current financial system is. And
Sure.
since then, we've relied, when I say we, governments have relied on printing money, keeping people pacified by spending, which is just unsustainable.
Yeah.
So for me, as someone who's interested in economic history and economic systems, this is the beginning of the end. And it's only allowed to happen because we, as people, as general population, allow it to happen. You know, um,
Sure.
we've seen how quickly systems can collapse. Recently, as I say, we're in July 22 here. Very recently, we had incidents in Sri Lanka where the people were
Mm.
just had enough of high prices and literally forced a change in regime. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to go to the extremes, but people do have the power to take to act on an individual basis and try and take that power away from the traditional system. And often we joke about voting with your wallet, meaning if you don't like a
Mm.
product, spend your money somewhere else. Well, here you can literally vote with your wallet, right? Create a Bitcoin wallet, create a crypto wallet, start using crypto in your life, taking custody of it yourself. It's very, very hard. I'll never say impossible, because we have the current political system where you can be forced to do things. But in theory, nobody can take that Bitcoin off you if you have that in a
All
wallet.
right.
And that should be the message I think that people should do. And it doesn't matter whether you start with $1, $10, or $100,000. It's sort of for me the most important thing is taking that centralized approach away from what I would call bad actors who are only allowed to carry out these models because we allow it. So, you know, that is for me what I always encourage people to do. You know, crypto as an investment tool is highly volatile, you know, and I would never recommend retail investors to put more money into crypto than they can afford to lose. But what you can do is you can contribute to the decentralization of the political and economic system by creating a wallet, by using crypto, by, you know, starting to educate yourself on why Bitcoin is so important.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of topics there. Uh, I think there's a lot of things we agree on, maybe not everything, but one theme that I sort of see there is sort of this idea of consent in societies, and how crypto can tie into that. Where I mean, I think increasingly we see a lot of societies where maybe almost half of the population is living with policies they haven't really consented to and paying for them, etc. And I think there's an interest. I mean, crypto is a tool in the toolbox to sort of redefine those relationships in a better way. I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess just also what you mentioned about Cyprus. For those that aren't familiar with what Omar was mentioning, interesting case to check out. I feel like maybe that's something that if I were to poll people in the U.S., I'm guessing that at least 80% of people probably have no idea of what happened there because it's a different. I think partially because a lot of the people that were storing funds there weren't from the U.S.
Sure.
But yeah, it is a case of a place where a lot of people thought their money was safe, and then only part of it was safe. Um, so yeah, that's definitely um, interesting there. All right. Well, I think we've had a really cool conversation here. Gonna try to keep it somewhat shorter for our audience. Although I'm sure we could probably talk for another hour or so and have a great time. What is the best way for people to find you or interact with you or follow with you or keep up to date on your ideas?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Probably LinkedIn and Twitter are the best. And then, as I say, we're just about to relaunch the new website, so yeah, it'll be super easy to sort of interact with us there. So yeah, would love to sort of come on again in the future and maybe have a catch up at some point in the future. But in the meantime, yeah, can follow me on sort of social media platforms and directly on the website as well.
All right. Well, that sounds great. I will do my best to put the links to your Twitter and LinkedIn in the episode, and then when the website's ready, I can try and add that in as well. Thanks again for your time, your ideas, your perspective. I really enjoyed the conversation today.
No, great, thank you. I had a lot of fun.
All right, perfect. I will be posting this interview on YouTube, Spotify, also looking into kind of more Web3 friendly platforms that I may be using in the future. And you can find it there. And we'll put links below to Omar's info. Thanks a lot, and stay tuned for more crypto and network state related content.